As I was out shooting my bow this morning, I was thinking about just practice in general. And practicing with the bow is essential, especially if you're going to be a bow hunter and want to be effective in the woods. But practicing with intention and practicing on specific components of your archery shot process can really make a huge difference. So today I wanted to talk about some of the things that I think about and some of those key components and principles of a solid practice routine, and just break down each of those for you. It's really easy to say you need to shoot your bow every day, and you absolutely should. If you're going to be hunting with a bow, having a consistent schedule and practicing as much as you possibly can is so important, because when you get into those high pressure shots, you want to be able to quickly drop into that muscle memory and drop into that consistency that you've built over time with your practice routine. But that said, if you're not practicing with intention or focusing on specific areas of improvement in your archery process, you could be practicing in the wrong way, right? And essentially creating bad habits, creating target panic, creating scenarios where you're doing things that are actually going to hurt your shot process over time. So today I'm going to break down those key principles. Let's talk about it. As I was thinking about this, I wrote down kind of 12 key principles that I thought were so important, and stuff that I try to work on as well as I'm thinking about improving my practice routine. Number one, start with proper form. Now, form can vary slightly from individual to individual, but having a consistent archery form and a strong foundation to build your practice on is absolutely essential, right? Everything else can fall apart, or everything else can become much harder to do right if you're not using the proper form. Each time you get into your shot routine and you're working through your practice routine, set that form first, right? It will become second nature as soon as you kind of continually practice that. But if you're not thinking about those things with each shot when you're working on your practice, you're not going to be thinking about it when it counts in the woods. So when I'm sitting here and I'm working on my shot and I'm shooting, I'm going through a checklist and I'm walking through each of those things. So my feet are square, shoulder width apart. I feel good, lining up my body to the target, working, setting my grip, setting my shoulder, and working through the shot. So the second principle and kind of core practice element is repetition, but repetition with purpose, right? You're going to make bad shots and you're going to make mistakes. What's important is when that happens, when you have that flyer, when you have that arrow that comes outside of the group, you stop and you think about, what was that and how can I correct it, right? A lot of people will just knock an arrow and go right back to it without thinking about what that mistake was or why that mistake affected their shot. But if you can slow down a little bit, work on repeating those quality shots and walking through your process with consistency, you're going to have less and less misses over time. And there's so many variables when you're shooting a bow. You're always going to have misses, right? But as you get better and better with your archery game, your misses are going to be fewer and farther in between, and they're going to be smaller, right? When you're new to archery, your miss may be missing the target. But as you progress with your practice and with your experience over time, your miss may be a few inches outside of your mark. So stay focused and work on repeating a quality shot, right? Think about every one of those shots that you take and make sure that you felt like it was a good shot. And if you didn't feel like it was a good shot, or if you see that your result was off, you had a miss, you had something off mark, sit down and think about what you could have done to improve that, and then try it and work on that fix. Third thing we're going to talk about here is the mental side of archery. Now, this is huge. I've heard a lot of guys talk about this, but having a mental shot process is so critical. Everything from, thinking about the steps of your shot, to visualizing your shot, to keeping that focus as your arrow goes down range and as you follow through. What I would recommend to help with this is to visualize every shot that you take. So as you're standing up at the target and as you're getting ready to take your shot, visualize the flight of that arrow coming in and hitting that center mark. And it sounds silly, but again, keep that visual in your head. Visualize yourself executing that perfect release, and then do it, right? And the more that you take the time to visualize it and see it in your head and then action it, the closer and closer those realities are going to come together, and you are going to improve over time. But having that mental focus, right, and picturing where that arrow is going to go and then executing on that and following through with that is an awesome way to practice. As you're practicing, think about the process, not necessarily about the outcome. This is super common in archery. A lot of people struggle to enjoy archery, especially in the beginning, because they're shooting and they're missing, or their group looks like a garbage can lid, and they just feel like, why can't I be better at this, right? I'm pulling the bow back, I'm putting the pin where it needs to go. Why is the arrow not going where I'm telling it to go? And that can be really, really frustrating. If you're focused on where that arrow is going, especially in the beginning, you could get demotivated really quickly, and you may never have a chance to actually progress in this sport. What I would recommend is, when you're first starting out, and even if you're getting to a point where you've been shooting a long time, but you're in a lull, or you're frustrated, or you're having a certain issue that you're working through, focus on the process itself. That may mean going up to 5 or 10 yards in front of the target and not thinking about where the arrow is actually going, but just working on that target, shooting into that bale, and thinking about the process, right? From start to finish, from your form to your stance to your draw cycle to your release and your follow through. Feel through each of those components and just work on that process, and do that over and over until you get to the point where you felt like you've executed good, solid shots consistently, and then back it up a little bit and work from there. But the key is to focus on the process, not the outcome, especially when you're talking about arrows going down range, because if you get the process right and you get your mental game right, your arrows are going to go where you want them. You just have to break it down and work on each of those components first. Speaking of breaking the things down, that brings us to the 6th tip of today, and that's to spend dedicated practice sessions working on one specific component, right? That may be your grip, that may be your anchors, that may be your release process, it may be your follow through. Whatever it is, take 1 or 2 practice sessions a week, 1 or 2 times when you're out shooting, and just focus on one specific thing. There are so many variables in an archery shot process that can change the outcome, right? But if you're working on something, if you're working on improving something, and you're not focused on one specific thing, it's easy to miss where the improvement actually was, or maybe you do make an improvement or an incremental adjustment on one part, say your grip, for example, but then since you're also making adjustments on your release hand, you're canceling it out, right? And it's hard to see progression and actually achieve progression without that kind of focus on a specific thing. So set a goal, set a specific target area for your practice, and dedicate a session to that, right? Today I'm going to dedicate to quality, perfect stance. So each time I take my shot, I'm going to check my feet, I'm going to set in, I'm going to make sure my posture is good, and I'm going to walk through that stance each time. Everything else, I'm just going to let it go automatically. But from a stance perspective, that's what I'm going to focus on today. And if you take that approach, you're going to drastically improve each of those areas rather than just improving everything a little bit, or even, lacking improvement in everything because you're trying to focus on too much at once. Practice tip number 7, add some pressure to your routine. Once you've gotten comfortable with your fundamentals, you've slowed down, you've worked on the core concepts, and you're shooting really well, now it's time to shake it up a little bit, right? Add some different elements to add pressure to your shot and to simulate real-world hunting scenarios and real-world pressure scenarios. That may be shooting from awkward positions, that may be shooting through tight lanes where a miss, ends up with an arrow in a tree or off target, right? Total Archery Challenge guys do this awesome. They'll typically set a target with boulders behind it, right? So if you miss that rabbit or that groundhog target, you lost your arrow. And that adds an element of pressure, and there's a different feel to those shots. There really is. It's the same thing if somebody's watching you shoot, right, versus shooting alone in your backyard. It adds an element of emotions. It adds an element of feeling. Some people get the shake. Some people lose a little bit of focus when there's some pressure or additional element. So the idea is you can be an excellent backyard shooter, right? If you're by yourself, if you're in a controlled environment, you're always shooting at that same target at that same distance, you may be exceptional, busting arrows, right? But if any of those other key things change, I got a plane going, give me a second. The point is, regardless of how good you are in your controlled practice environment, where your comfort zone is, when something changes, you need to kind of simulate those changes in your practice routine so you're ready for it and you know what it feels like. A really common one is wind. A lot of people will not spend time shooting in the wind from a practice perspective, and then as soon as the wind starts blowing, everything is lost, right? If your bow is getting blown around and you're struggling to get the shot off, you may not be able to hit the broadside of a barn if you haven't practiced that and you don't understand what that feels like. So incorporate different pressure scenarios into your shot routine and into your practice. Shoot on a windy day, shoot on a rainy day, shoot from an awkward location, and you'll find that when you find yourself in those real life scenarios, especially when you're out there hunting, you're going to be much more comfortable and you're going to be ready to rock and roll. I talked a little bit about focusing on a specific element of your practice, and another thing that can be helpful is breaking that down into a focused, time-bound session, right? The idea is a sharp practice session of 30 minutes where you are hyper-focused on one thing and you're truly working on sharpening that specific skill can be much better than, an hour and a half or 2 hours of just mindless shooting. So as you're going out to practice, think about that key element that you're going to work on. Think about how you're going to execute that practice, and then also how long you're going to execute that practice for. Stick a timer on yourself, right? And you're going to see great results from that session. You can make so much more progress with intent just by setting that goal and setting that pace for your practice session right up front. Build consistency by varying different elements of your practice, right? Again, introducing different elements, different distances, different environments, different targets into that practice can be key. It's really easy for all of us to get stuck in the same routine. You step out on the back porch, you've got your target sitting at 40 yards, and you start ripping arrows. Change it up and it will make a huge difference, right? If you have to go somewhere else to shoot, if you have to go shoot at a range, or if you have to, get a different target, having that variability in your practice routine will make all the difference in the world, right? Again, it's very easy to get good at something that's exactly the same every time. But if you build into your practice things that change, right? You're shooting, I've got a hog and a deer down here, I've got another bag target. I switch it up all the time. I switch up the distances all the time, and that makes a huge difference. I like the concept of the chip shot, right? If you shoot long distance consistently, when it comes to that 20-30 yard shot in the woods, it feels like a chip shot, and you can't beat that. So stretch it out, bring it super close, change your targets up, just vary how you're shooting and how you're practicing, so when you get out there in that real world scenario, it doesn't matter what happens, you're going to be ready to go. So this tip is going to be maybe counterintuitive, maybe a little controversial, but sometimes don't practice. I mean, honestly, if you are having a bad day, if you're not in the right mindset, if you get out there and you pull your bow back and it doesn't feel good, or you're making some shots and you're just not in the mood, put the bow down, right? Just take a break, rest, relax. You can do it quite a bit of damage in your shot and kind of burst your confidence, right? If you're just trying to power through a bad day. Everybody has off days, right? Consistency is key. Get out and shoot your bow and practice as much as you can. But if you're having one of those days where it's just not working, you're frustrated, you're angry, take a day to rest, right? If you don't want to get away from archery, go do something else. Watch some archery YouTube videos. Go watch somebody else shoot. But don't kill yourself. Don't get into a state of frustration. Because again, you can overdo it. You can overtrain, you can overpractice. Sometimes you need to take a step back. The key is getting back on that wagon, getting back on the horse, right? So if you have that rough day, don't stop shooting for a week or a month. Then you may never come back, right? Take the time, shoot, take a day off, sit back, take a breath, and then get back to it the next day. Almost guaranteed you're going to feel a whole lot better. So last but not least, and this is a good one, get feedback from an outside source on your practice. Now, if you've got somebody that you shoot with, you've got a buddy, you got a friend, you have a wife that is shooting with you or spending time with you, ask them to take a look at certain elements of your practice and your shot, right? How does my form look? How did my release look? Were my anchors consistent, etc.? That's one great way to do it. The other easy way, right? Everybody's got a cell phone nowadays. Stick your cell phone on record mode and take a video of yourself, right? Take a video of your form, of your whole shot process. You're gonna go back and look at that and you're gonna see things that, maybe you didn't realize, right? A lot of times it feels different when we're doing something than as it actually looks. And if say you're working on your anchor, and as you're watching that video back, you see that on some shots you're up here, on other shots you're down here, and that's making the difference in your shot placement downrange. So work on incorporating feedback into your practice, and that feedback can be with somebody else, a coach, a friend, somebody that's shooting with you that understands where you're working, or do it with the technology. Throw a video camera up there, take a look and video yourself, and then you'll know how to continue to improve. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and some of these tips you can take and put into your own practice routine. Get out there, shoot your bow, have fun, go hunt, but most importantly, continue to hone your skills, right? Don't just go out there and fling arrows for the heck of it. Have intent, have a goal, and you're going to improve your archery game. All right, see you next time.